This is a trip report which can be found on arrowwid.org, titled The Process in the Infinite Oneness, a DPT Trip by Hedge Clipper. One night I was with my friend who will go by the pseudonym K. He had done a lot, luckily, and researched chemicals before this experience. I had only done research, chemicals, and mush. I had not yet popped my acid cherry. We had gotten into a heated discussion about drugs and the like, and I told him about the damn powerful tryptamine. He was eager to try it, and I had been thinking about it for a long time, so we decided to go over to my friend's house. He will go by the name P. Of course, neither of us could possibly fathom what we were in for. So the three of us went down to P's basement and weighed out the lines. P did 200 milligrams as he tried it before and insisted that K and I do at least 150 in order to fully break through and get past the point of fear and anxiety. So we weighed out the lines and stared at them in a silent build-up of anticipation for nearly like half an hour, which reached climax once P yelled, "Why do we do this to ourselves?" And the three of us simultaneously snorted the powder. It felt like a needle frozen to absolute zero, penetrating my nose 1,000 times. Then a cold tremor slowly spread through my body from my nose to my fingertips. It felt like as if I were falling into ice water in slow motion, and the entire room violently shifted and trailed off. A feeling of the most profound unfamiliarity spread through my mind. I waved my hand in front of my eyes to test the visuals. I expected to see some trails. Instead, I saw an indescribable number of solid versions of my hand, slightly overlapping each other, plastered across my vision. The hands proceeded to fractalize into infinity, with far too many iterations for my mind to process. Kay and I looked at each other, and while English still existed, I screamed, What the fuck did we just snort?" And we both leaped for the benzos that were sitting on the table. Some cosmetic energy must have judged us for our cowardness, and the table simply melted away right before our eyes. I'm still not sure whether or not we took the benzos, but after this, I was confronted with a horrible, mutated, distorted version of myself. The changes in my body somehow represented my naivete and fear, and it disgusted me. It said, "drugs." And the word was repeated infinitely until all connotations were stripped from the sound. And then the peak began. I felt the psychotic tremor build in my body until it was as if I was laying on concrete next to a jackhammer. But the vibrations were coming from within me, pumping through all my veins and nerves simultaneously. My body and soul were being stretched and squeezed through every nook and cranny of the cosmos. I was imploding and exploding, concave and convex, happy and sad. Was through tunneling through all possible dimensions, and sensory overload was too much to bear. And then I died. Suddenly I found myself looking down from the ceiling on all three of our bodies, mutilated, with blood pouring out all arteries, and I felt surprisingly calm. I thought to myself, well, I guess we just killed ourselves. We can only go forward from here. For an indescribable period of time, I lived in the world of death and fear, with eyes in all the walls staring into my soul. There had been an awful glitch in the universe, and it would remain this way for eternity. I was granted hundreds of new, complete alien senses, which would be like describing sight to a blind man. And my unfamiliar sensor apparatus was being poked and prodded with painful impossibilities. And the world of death simply was. We had a vague idea that something normal had existed before, but that was eons ago, and we were forced to relinquish all preconceptions and familiarities, and then something beautiful happened. I felt the tiniest spark of life, and it built up until I was stronger and stronger and brighter, and suddenly, the elastic band of my perception snapped. It reminded me from the scenes from The Matrix when they broke through the clouds and see the true sky for a split second. I felt all life's vibrations simultaneously. I felt all the living that ever had happened and ever would happen, and my consciousness was lit up with the most vibrant, beautiful, impossible colors. I could see the submicroscopic particle vibrating with life, and I lived in this world, and I was caressed in every atom. When I was confronted with a lurking fear and impurity in the beauty, and it built up more and more until I was back in the room in the basement. I felt pure hatred and loneliness, and lost in a time loop. The rag doll of all sorts of horrible, mutilated, hateful entities which were laughing at me from all around. I was a naked baby in the deepest, darkest corner of reality, with absolutely no sympathy or compassion. It was all worth it when I felt the love. I was brought to a world where I felt pure, distilled essence of love. Every particle. Love in all its form, okay? Sexual, emotional, physical, and of the purest beauty conceivable. My new senses were being stroked and caressed by the universe, and I felt all love that ever was or ever would be. Time no longer had a meaning. I felt hints of what was to come. My ego was completely obliterated, and all that there was love. And it was beautiful and complete. I was held at the very peak of orgasm for millennia. And then the climax, feeling somehow fractalized, and I felt millions of iterations of the feeling of iterations of the feeling of pure physical and emotional pleasure all at once. And my hundreds of senses were melded together in pure synthesia. The word ecstasy and bliss fall light years short of describing it. I lived in a world of polar opposites for years, and it felt like they were coming together, spiraling upward, entwining with each other more and more tightly, like chainsaw building up a techo drop. My perception was changing and morphing so quickly, my brain could hardly process its surroundings. It was like playing a high-quality movie on a slow computer, with everything lagging somehow beautifully. My reality moved forward in beautiful arabesque, entwining lines weaving into each other somehow digitally. I felt the collective God of the universe whisper to me and hint at itself, and the zang. Every atom of my body was simultaneously split into infinite thermonuclear explosions. I felt my body go through the process of nuclear fusion, and I became a star, where all possible realities and all polar opposites came together into one beautiful singularity. It was the point where all complements unite, where all things come together, where there's no future, present, or past. Time is solid, dissolute, meaningless, the purest expression of the oneness of the universe. It was like staring into the sun for 1,000 years, the light of the universe blinding all your senses and just burning into your soul. There is no I, there is no ego. It simply is. It is God. It is the process. This was the DPT peak, the most mind-blowing possible experience, and as if to conclude this part of the experience, I was once again confronted with a strange version of myself. This time, however, my form was immaculate and fine, emanating serenity and infiniteness, sitting in the lotus position and hovering above the ground with one finger to my lip. It was to say the old you was wrong. This is no drug. This is holy. This is sacrament. After the peak, once the ego begins to return, however, is the truly bizarre part of the trip. I found myself once again in Peace Basement. I was not yet back in my own body, but I now had some perception of my surroundings. I was seeing myself and my friends from a third-person perspective, and the room was made of some sort of grotesque organic matter, with walls consisting of grimy organs and bloody vessels, and thousands of terrible eyes staring at me. It was like being in a Zerg building from StarCraft. The trip then became some sort of awful parody of my own existence, taking on a dark, demonic funhouse sort of feeling, where everything was distorted and mutated in some sort of horrifyingly comedic way. I looked at Kay and said, Dude, what the fuck? And pointed at Kay. Then he pointed at P, and P made a strange, dismissive sort of gesture. I looked at Kay and said, Dude, what the fuck? And pointed at Kay. Then he pointed at P, and P made a strange, dismissive sort of gesture. And then I said, Dude, what the fuck? And pointed at K. And he pointed at P. And horrifyingly, the cycle continued. I found myself stuck in an incredibly long time loop. I thought to myself, if I didn't play my part in the loop, then it would end. But every time it came around to my turn to make my gesture, and thus continue the loop, I would find myself pointing at K. I had somehow lost my free will. It was horrifying. I truly believed I would be stuck in this loop eternally. But something strange happened. Kay's third eye opened up, and he bent down and vomited out of his consciousness. It was pink vomit-like fluid floating all around the room. It looked like liquid, but somehow it was solid. Kay's glasses had fallen into the liquid, and we simply stared at his consciousness with his glasses sitting in it, and looked at each other in the strangest expressions. Then I saw him in the fetal position, shivering with the most horrifying expression I've ever seen on his face. And some of the pink liquid, which represented his consciousness, found its way into my mind. I felt what it was like to be him for a split second. And I started to get the fear too. We remain in this liquid, but somehow solid horror funhouse world. Except now, with a touch of digital feeling for what seemed like forever. I still had no idea I had taken a drug, but I knew that I had been in the basement far too long. And if I would remain there much longer, I would in all likelihood be stuck in that tormenting basement of purgatory for eternity. So I made a run to the door. I ran for the stairs, and climbing the steps was a harrowing journey, as if through the intestinal tract of some strange monster, with my mind fully focused on that beautiful shimmering doorknob. But as soon as my hand touched the doorknob, I found myself sitting back on the chair, as if some cruel entity would rewind time whenever I came close to escape, just toying with me horribly. I kept going in this process for ages, until what sounded like some sort of cosmic laugh track played. A cacophony of terrible laughter filled my ears, and I felt the most intense possible feeling of embarrassment. I had made some sort of horrible mistake, and all of humanity was laughing at me. Somehow, we finally managed to get out of the basement. It felt like it had been years. I was confronted with the most amazing possible sense of relief just to see the upstairs of the house. The world was still profoundly abnormal, but at least we escaped the basement. Things from the past kept happening in the future, and the future in the present, and the present in the past, all at the same time. Time was not even remotely linear, but we could all at least walk around at this point. We previously decided not to go outside onto the street while on DPT, but we no longer cared. We saw the front door and believed the only way to escape the eternal limbo of the monstrous house was to get out on the streets, no matter what we confront out there. So we somehow managed to open the front door, and what we saw shocked our mutual existence to its very core. We opened the door, and there was nothing outside. Our little trip was of all existence, and when we came to that horrible synopsis realization, I remember looking at P and K, seeing the most profound expression of terror possible. I remember looking at P and K and seeing the most profound expression of terror possible. Next, P's brother came downstairs. He looked like some sort of awesome, godlike entity. I couldn't even speak after the shock of the lack of existence outside the house, but Kay believed P's brother was God and confessed all his mortal sins to him, praying at his feet. Eventually, we reached our come down. At this point, it was like being on maybe 10 strips of LSD, but our egos started to find their way back into our bodies. Kay said, "Didn't we have names? Weren't we people?" P said, "Didn't we live in Montreal?" I said, yeah. I was K and you were J. And Kay said, no. It was the other way around. Eventually we all figured out who we were. The rest of the trip was still somewhat terrifyingly, and apparently I died at some point. And P gave me CPR. But it might have just been a metaphor. Either way, I woke up almost a day later, and I hadn't slept in a very long time. My brain was very tired. Apparently Kay ran out of the house halfway across the city as soon as the door opened and to some sort of reality.